Excellent. So let me say, for all of you that are just starting at Anderson, a big welcome. And I think it's absolutely critical to plant the seed in your mind about what goes on in the global immersions, what goes on in technology, et cetera, to think about, your journey that's here. And to all the people that have already graduated, we have quite a few and a lot remote. Lifelong learning is such an important part of education today, and technology is a living example of that because of the rate of change. I want to thank also Lucy, because the partnership between the Easton Center and the Center for Global Management is one of the tightest ones. Some of it is my own experience working and living abroad and teaching now in this immersion, that the opportunity to see how technology looks different in different places is important. I remember when I first moved abroad, classic American moving abroad, and said, why can't this market, I'll leave the market blank to protect the innocent, why can't they do this with their mobile networks? Why can't they create these type of applications? And I remember my boss, Arun Sarin, said, very wise, he said, Terry, remember, context matters. And I thought it was a brush-off statement at the time. It was one of the wisest things that I ever heard, which is saying, as you're thinking about strategy and direction, first think about the context. What do you know about the marketplace? What do you know about the maturity of technology? What do you know about public policy and the role of government? And then define strategy. This issue happens regularly, not just people going from US abroad and back, but within organizations. You see people taking on new roles, and sometimes they don't do well in a new role because they come out guns a-blazing thinking they know the team, know the market, and they get it wrong. And so this idea about contextual leadership to me is so important, to really be a student of the context and then think about how product, services, and other things will come out. This global immersion, and I'm going to give you a few slides to give you some background on it. To me, it's one of the great opportunities to do that. And to my tech immersion students that are here, they're already asking incredibly insightful questions that have kind of started the journey. I just recommend everybody stay on that journey. Let me give you a little bit of context very briefly about the global immersion, and then we're going to do a panel discussion. So to start out, in terms of the construct, all of you know that have already had me as an instructor. All of the learning objectives in my courses fall into two camps. It's the same in all of them. Learn the domain of whatever that course is. So in this case, it's learn technology. Learn what AI is doing and cloud computing and all the great things that are there. But the second one is the leadership mental software. How do you think about strategy based on a set of facts? And in an era of AI, we as humans got to get better and better and better, because the machine is going to get pretty good. But we do have that ability to advance. So that is going to be what is the focus of our immersion. It's going to continue to be the focus of our immersion. The immersion has 4 on-campus sessions. So 3 classes in person where we cover a variety of cases on luminary Chinese tech companies, DJI that makes drones, TikTok and their AI strategy, Ant Financial, part of Alibaba that has developed the use of AI to figure out lending in a variety of markets. So we have 3 classes in person. We then go in country, kind of armed with some understanding of context, and visit a variety of companies in market that Lucy referred to. These are luminary companies you'll see. Temasek is one of the world's largest investors based in Singapore. Tencent, it'd be paying it a disservice to say that they're the Meta of Asia, because they're much more. They're a super app that we'll talk about how that looks fundamentally different than what we see here in the US. Alibaba, that now has moved into cloud computing in addition to e-commerce. Grab is a company that Lucy mentioned based in Southeast Asia and Singapore that is like an Uber, but again, context is unique there that has changed a lot of their offerings. So we do the week in country, and then we come back here, and students come up with a team project. They have to come up with a brand new technology-based product and make a case to their classmates why it will be adopted and raise capital. So they have to think really pragmatically about what they've learned. terms of other items here, let me see if the clicker, let me go one. In terms of the learnings in country, so I'll give you a summary of that, but we're going to dive deeper with the panelists that are here. Number one, you see big tech in a lot of areas of innovation in the greater Asia region, partly because of the rapid growth of the companies and partly an interest in going more horizontal. So when you look at Tencent as an example, unlike Meta here, it is a consumer and an enterprise business. It has a very large business in cloud computing as an example because of the unique aspect in China when they were building out. So a lot of big tech related growth. There's a big focus on tech and society. So tech and society is the ability to use technology that will help society. Healthcare, education, transportation. We saw a lot of that, and student ideas were very much oriented around tech and society. And by the way, there's always a dark side to that about society being harmed by technology. So how are the products and services creating the right game? Focus on the collective. It's a fascinating cultural difference. In general, the US is highly individualistic. That creates a unique set of dynamics in technology products and regulation and what gets approved versus a more collective focus that is observed in Asia, solving for a community, a bigger group of individuals. And again, the impact on what type of products are created. And then Singapore as an incredible bridge between China and the US with its own unique characteristics. So I'm going to now shift over because what we're going to do is do a panel discussion with people, as Lucy mentioned, that took the Immersion last year. And what I encourage you to do is think about what they're saying. What did they observe? And importantly, how did their mental software grow as individuals? I want to start out because Bilal is joining us. He's our first speaker. And Bilal is a former student, by the way, of all three of my tech classes. That's why he may look like he's aged a little bit, but he's done actually great. He's got a very unique role at Amazon. He just graduated in June here from Anderson, the full-time MBA program. He joined Amazon in Seattle as a senior program manager, where he focuses on premium fashion on Amazon.com, helping grow its position as a dominant, trusted retail site for all purchases. Before that, the summer before, he worked for Nike as a summer intern, as a global technology strategy and business operations MBA intern. He focused on a 3-year roadmap on cost optimization for consumer products and innovation. He graduated with a specialization in global management. He took, as I mentioned, 3 of the tech courses here. Bilal, a big welcome and good to have you with us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Our second speaker here, so immediately to my left, Juliana Ipuz. So she graduated in our EMBA program just last June. She's a global strategic account manager for the biopharma segment for Colder Products company. She's got 20 years experience in business development, in sales, in a variety of areas, in the biopharmaceutical area, medical devices, manufacturing. As I mentioned, she just got her MBA here from Anderson. She's got experience geographically in a variety of markets. Markets including US, Europe, Asia, and Latin America. She's got both a strategic focus and a big results orientation. Juliana, it's nice to have you here.
Thank you.
And last but not least, we have Dr. Sarah Martin here. So she's in our FEMBA program, our fully employed MBA program. She's also the president of the FEMBA Council. So she's been elected by her classmates to collect feedback and advocate on behalf of our students. She holds her PhD in pharmacology from the University of Colorado, brings a lot of experience as an industry scientist with a focus on metabolic effects in oncology and immuno-oncology. Her background includes working at companies including Charles River Laboratories, Servier Pharmaceuticals, and Agios Pharmaceuticals. She's got a bachelor's degree in biochemistry. So a big welcome to you, So I am going to ask our three panelists a series of questions, just 3 or 4 questions, and then we're going to open it up to questions that you have. You will get a chance to experience, for those of you new to these events, especially the Easton and CGM ones, we use Slido for questions. We very much believe in technology and democratization. So what you do is you go to slido.com, for those that have not used it, SLIDO.com, and it'll ask you for an event code. You enter global immersion, no spaces. And you can either enter in your own question or you can upvote an existing one. And I will endeavor to pose the most popular questions that come up. So let me go ahead and start out here. And again, welcome to all of you guys for being here. I always like to start out in these events and just say, tell me what your going in view was before you took the immersion, before you traveled in region, and what was your coming out experience? Juliana?
I'll start. Well, congratulations. Thanks for being here tonight. First of all, I only took the class because a classmate from 2024 said I couldn't graduate Anderson unless I had a class with Terry. So that was my prerequisite. It's like, I have to take this class, any class he teaches. And it was quite transformative. I'm from the pharmaceutical industry, and sometimes things are very slow and very traditional. So I got just a look of technology that I am not exposed to in a day-to-day basis in my job. Mm-hmm. It opened up my perspective on what technology can do. And I can talk about examples here in the future after my other classmates talk. And it was just transformative. I mean, to go not only view it here in the US, but seeing it in a different region and how advanced it is and how it's changing how people live, both the pros and, some challenges, was so interesting to see. So it was, should I go into detail or just?
I'll come back, but I'm going to plant the seed. Also, the other thing I do is I always do my so whats at these events, as I encourage all of my students to, so you get it. So the rate of adoption is one of your points. It's likely going to make the so whats of the evening. And I'm going to ask you to drill down on it a bit more. Sarah?
Before I went, I decided I wanted to do a little bit of YouTube research, right? And just watched a basic video about the history of Shenzhen, and really how it was a farming town that got transformed over time. And Professor Kramer kept saying, it's really amazing. Just wait till you get there. And I was just kind of like, yeah, YouTube videos, it's like the pyramids, right? They show what they want you to see. But it was really amazing once we got there to see the transformation that had taken place and how progressive everybody was, that, they were hungry and they still wanted to continue to grow and transform, even though, it was astonishing to see the growth and development that has happened in Shenzhen. And I think that was like one of the biggest things, is just to see, how hungry they were to continue that growth.
Excellent. We're going to come back to it to describe what it looks like and kind of the imagery. Bilal?
Yeah, so when I first came in, I never even heard of Shenzhen. I thought China was still in the infancy of technology, just, commoditized goods. But coming out, I felt like, wow, this is really where AI can take us in the world outside of America and Western companies. And you only really hear about the negative parts about China. While you go in there, you hear a lot about the positives. So it gives you a good view of what to really see in between the lines, which I really appreciate, because you get to see, the X's and the O's and what's really there in face value. And then, going into it, there's just so many opportunities into your bubble, in your own bubble. There's a lot more outside of LA, America. And I just really want to see, like, what does the Anderson alumni look like outside of the US and LA?
Excellent, Bilal. And again, I'm going to come back to you on this idea of people's dated views about what's happening in China on technology, which again is a big learning. So now let's go down deeper onto your learnings. So we kind of talked about initial impressions going in, going out, but what were the learnings that you took away? Whether they're from an academic standpoint, a professional standpoint, what concepts? You can talk about adoption or anything else you'd like to.
So one of the things, and you'll probably learn this in strategy, is the network effect. So we saw it live with Shenzhen, the company SHEIN. So most of you know it, the clothing company. You probably get clothing perhaps from it. But to see their headquarters in Singapore and to see how they work with all of their environments. So the designers, the platform, the customers, the manufacturers, and the speed at which they can change designs, and each of them feed into each other, right? So the customers like a design, so the designers design more of what they like, which feeds more into the platform, which feeds more demand into the manufacturing. That was fascinating to learn that the SHEIN also helps manufacturing companies either improve their working conditions. They have childcare for workers in the factory. I mean, just changing not only what we buy as consumers, but just the environment around them and the society around them. So that was fascinating to witness and to learn about.
Excellent. So by the way, the tech immersion students I have now, you're getting a rapid dose of kind of ideas here. SHEIN is a platform-based model. It's a multi-sided platform. So again, to Juliana's point, it's matching manufacturers, designers, customers, and it's a big bang disruption, meaning better performance at lower cost and better speed because of the ability to customize and know designs. A fascinating capability we don't see a lot of here in the US, but this company is obviously a global company now. We'll see a lot more of it. Sarah, your learnings?
I think to kind of go along with what I said about the hunger, a lot of our speakers, they talked about sometimes moving fast, right? You break things, but that's okay. And, the fact that, from the Damascus Trust, right? And the investments that, they're making on behalf of Singapore, as well as some of the individual companies that are investing a lot into different areas of technology. It was really exciting to see companies that were willing to take risks in certain areas because they can see that there is a societal need there. And that they're willing to try it, right? And I think, thinking back on the United States, that's how we got ahead early on. And I think we've gotten a little bit more fearful around taking the risk. So it was really cool to see, that it is still a successful strategy if done right? If you continue to learn from it. But to see all of these companies taking some of those big risks, I think, and learning that's okay sometimes.
Perfect. One of the first readings we have in the class is rates of adoption. They show people that are elderly in China using mobile pay solutions. And the mindset is people have seen so much advancement in a short period of time. The willingness to try is fairly strong. And there's an interesting kind of implication of a lot of this is technology does require fairly fast adoption. In AI, you see this. If you don't adopt, often you're at a disadvantage. So it raises some bigger issues. Bilal, your thoughts?
Yeah, first I want to talk about the breadth and depth of the different technologies. Tech is in every industry now. So when it comes to the immersion, you're going to be able to touch upon different companies that touch essentially everything from SHEIN to Dobot, Grab, Alibaba. So you get to see a lot in terms of different industry and essentially how these super apps allow you, for example, Grab. It's a food delivery service. It's a rideshare service. They do insurance, GPS, and a lot more. So really how super apps can allow companies to really hyper localize in certain cities and how Shenzhen is geographically positioned to really give themselves that delta where they have a super city when it comes to healthcare, technology, pharma, as well as finance, where Hong Kong sits. So that's why I really appreciate how governments as well as tech companies can really collaborate for tech for good and how that can be used in the long run.
Yeah, and Bilal's bringing up a fascinating point. If you have to innovate now, later in the game, in many cases China, you generally do leapfrog innovation. So if you're trying to think about payments, you're not going to develop branch banks and ATMs and credit cards. You're going to go to a mobile pay solution. And so when Bilal's talking about super apps, if you have the ability to not just have one or two services on a social network, but instead you can buy goods and services, et cetera, you've created more value. You have the benefit of that by starting kind of first in that arena. So let me ask you guys now about contextual leadership. If you think about your work lives today, how has kind of contextual leadership, that skill, changed your mindset? How are you applying it in work? And Bilal, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, I mean, for me, the tariffs are hitting me bad, are really hitting me bad. Companies like, for example, like who's the biggest disruptor? I work for Amazon, so we're number one when it comes to e-commerce, but who's really going to come up behind us and beat us? And I think, SHEIN and this team and companies like that is a perfect example of, companies that you don't expect in a different geography to really tack on a niche and being able to use, for example, AI to give trends, not just in seasons, but in weeks. Right now, the current industry for me is thinking, oh, we have a spring, summer, winter collection. But in 2 years with AI, is that still going to be relevant? Second is kind of how can Amazon be a late mover for using that technology in the U.S. and how we can really use potentially Southeast Asia as an incubator of testing AI in different geographies. It's using that same system since we don't have a lot of privacy and data collection within U.S. citizens. It'll be easier maybe in geographies in Asia and in implementing those features to the West. And then, AI is everywhere. Can't really escape it. You have to use it or you might lose it.
Yeah, good. Excellent. Sarah?
So just quickly, I wanted to touch on Bilal nicely introduced Grab. And I think I learned a lot from the speaker from Grab, who talked about his expansion into Indonesia and how these super apps are great for people who have phones with a lot of data capacity. But what do you do with the drivers that maybe can't afford those phones or phone plans, and how they had to kind of innovate based on where they were at and how to sign up drivers. And it was really fascinating. I won't give it away in case you guys go and you can ask the question yourself. But it made me think about a project I'm working on right now with UCLA's Tech Transfer Office, where they're trying to help use AI to help the investigators at the university progress assets forward to be more commercializable. And so, a lot of these investigators, they have their science or engineering, they're experts in their area, but they don't really know how to scale something. And so being able to kind of see how he was able to take, this complex app and kind of break it into pieces and make it easier and more accessible to people, it's really influenced how I'm approaching this project and how I can potentially use AI to really help facilitate this process and hopefully get some of their products out to the market faster.
Yeah. Sarah, do you remember some of the examples that Jerry, who heads up all of customer experience, gave in terms of delivery navigation in malls?
No.
He basically said, that's okay, you still passed. He basically talked about how much more in Singapore people are spending in malls, these very dense, high-rise malls, and the issue of navigation services. We think we got navigation services great here in the US. We ain't seen nothing yet because they need very precise navigation to tell when somebody's delivering a food item to the third floor of an 8-story mall where to send it and to save time. They're able to collect information on weather by the windshield wipers on vehicles. They have heavy thunderstorms there. They're able to find out sooner where the thunderstorms are that can modify delivery time for a lot of their services. Just fascinating. But again, in that environment, they had to do it. That was a requirement of the market. Juliana?
For me, it's understanding AI and where it's going. I know Bilal touched on this as well, is it's here. Whether you get on board or not, it's not going to wait for any of us. So learning to see how you can integrate it, how you can learn more about it, how will your role be affected by it. I think that's critical. In the company that I work for, one side is pharmaceutical, but we have a whole team focused on the advances of AI. So having this exposure has made me more curious of, let me talk to the division. What are they doing? They have big bets with NVIDIA and the new chip coming out. I read this morning, Facebook is building a data center the size of Manhattan in Louisiana. All that supply chain, all of that hardware, all the software needed. I mean, there's so many opportunities with this. So to me, it's broadened my perspective of coming in with the class saying, I just needed to have a course with this professor. It's broadened my perspective on the opportunities and where I see my career going next.
Good. And let me tag on that and ask you, how has it changed? When you think about, hey, I've done this immersion, I've had classes at Anderson, et cetera. How has your view about what you want to do longer term changed?
So definitely, I mean, being more, it's like a language, a new language that you're learning, right? How to use AI and where it's going has been critical for me to understand. And I look at businesses differently. I mean, I'm seeing AI being adopted in healthcare. So my doctor is now taking notes and being able to pay attention instead of having to type out the notes when I'm in visit. They're saying, hey, can I record this? Can we automatically get notes so that way I can pay more attention to you? That's one. Two, again, healthcare, I'm using an app. It takes me a month to get into physical therapy. I hurt my back, different story. But there's this app that can give me personal training, personalized personal training on my phone. I no longer have to wait a month or however long it takes to see somebody. Those are things that are happening that I'm seeing and experiencing right now that I'm like, okay, where can I play a role in this? And again, being more curious in the division in my company that's focused on AI of both the big opportunities, but there's big risk as well, because the speed to market is critical for these companies. Either you're ready to go or you're out of the game. So, we're talking about speed to market. That's critical when it comes to AI and the innovations or the advances in AI.
Perfect. Bilal, your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Like almost in every industry, you're like Juliana said, you're going to use AI. But the question is, are you going to be using it as a tool, or are you going to use it to build your own business? Are you going to use it to enhance your work? And I think that's really what the value is. I think, AI such as ChatGPT, Gemini, you're going to see little facets of that everywhere. It's going to be like the next Google search or just kind of the next big thing. And right now it's still being developed. It's an internet browser right now. It could be a humanoid. It could just be in your car. It could be in your brain. However, I think what the real value is using it to be able to create what's next quicker. And secondly, being able to adapt to it, because that means technology is going to grow faster, but also means industries will die quicker and grow quicker. So that's something to be aware of. The speed that AI works with is something us humans don't really understand yet. And it's just something to be aware of. And it's just like the .com bubble, there would be an AI bubble, but you will see an increase and a decrease as things go.
Good. And Bilal, let me ask you, Poets and Quants, which, covers like MBA, business schools, all of that. They just did a survey, and I shared it in class today, about the most important skills that MBAs have from a recruiter standpoint. And AI was the number one item. It was above strategic thinking, which is just kind of like shocking how people use AI. Can you just say a little bit, whether it's Amazon, Nike, elsewhere, what is your advice about what students today need to have when they're in the workforce regarding AI?
Yeah, I would say number one is don't be afraid to use it. Number two is be careful of data, because data is the most valuable asset. Second, you want to think about how can AI be structured? That's going to create new roles. So when I was at Nike, I thought about roadmaps. For example, how do we use AI in every division? Are we going to have an AI task force? Are we going to have an AI leader in every org? And then at Amazon, some recommendations I would give, at Amazon right now, a recommendation I would give that I did was join the AI task force. Let them know you want to be involved. Join a hackathon, be involved in that process, and use AI to your ability. But you also have to think outside the box, because with AI, everyone else will use it and you might get the same responses. So, you got to take that step further. How do you see what's not there for the future without coming up with it?
Good. What on that last point, Bilal, what are those items? If you say, hey, listen, AI is going to be able to do basic analytic tasks, and you're going to have to, as a graduating student here, move past the basic stuff, what would be those other items?
It's a tough one. But I would say like the basic items I would think for is, number one is the baseline. Like how do I increase manual processes? How do I decrease manual processes and make them easier? Number two is how can we use AI to increase product development? How can we use AI for operations in terms of process improvement? And lastly, how can we use AI to make our lives as employers as well as citizens easier for everybody? So making it as a task for good as well.
Excellent. Excellent. And Sarah, for you, and by the way, in another minute or two, I'm going to go to the audience question. So again, slido.com, event code, global immersion. We already have quite a few questions, but if you do want to pose one or upvote, go to that site. Sarah, your thoughts on this?
So obviously, Professor Kramer told you I have my doctorate, so my PhD in philosophy. And so I love to ask questions. And actually, before we got started, Professor Kramer said that we're not allowed to ask him any more questions because we asked him so many questions. And so I think for me, being able to use these large language models to really go beyond strategy and really question my way of thinking, and really challenge everything that I'm doing. I definitely want to continue to utilize it in that way because it really pushes me beyond my comfort area. And that's one thing that I think is really helpful. We also briefly talked about, where it can aid in things that are really solvable. And I think you might touch on it a little bit, so I don't want to give too much away. But really, like in pharmaceuticals, chemistry is kind of a solved science. And so if you can put the brain of hundreds of chemists into one system, right, it can work so much faster and come up with so much more innovation than one individual over their lifetime. And so, being able to kind of capture the voice of many, many experts into kind of these AI agents is something that I think is really cool and can be quite transformative, especially in my industry, where you really need years of expertise that I think we can capture in these agents.
Perfect. Excellent. Let me ask one last question to each of you, and then we're going to go to the audience questions. And that is, what is your advice to the people that are attending today? Right? We have incoming students, we have alums. What is your advice, whether it's academic advice, professional advice, or something else? Juliana?
Do the tech management track. Take as many courses from Professor Kramer as you can. I think that was, for me, very transformative. It was one of the best classes I had here at Anderson, so highly recommended.
Cool, thank you.
I'll get paid later.
Does anybody have any cash?
No, seriously, hands down. It really changed my mindset of thinking about the future and business. So now I view business differently. I mean, I'm at the airport. I travel a lot for work. Thinking, okay, what companies are doing this? Because everything is becoming more automated and that's not going to stop. So the more you can start thinking about, Bilal mentioned this, what's next? Sarah mentioned, getting a huge data set of experts together. The more you get exposed to that, the more conferences you attend, the more people you hear, both. And don't be just one-sided, the pros and cons of what we're getting into, because a lot of it is still unknown, private data privacy, how your information can be used. The more exposure you have of this, the better you are equipped for your next step, right? Whether in my cohort, we saw a lot of changes within the 2 years that we were here. So don't just wait until you graduate to start making the changes, to start networking. But I think this is something that I've become, from not being a techie and being like the last adopter type of very conservative person, to be the one advocating now for the more exposure you get, the more learnings you get, the better you're off.
Excellent. Sarah?
Definitely challenge yourself. I think all of us in this room are high achievers, and, we get fearful of like, well, I don't want to take this class because everyone says it's hard. And what if I don't get an A? Like, I have to get straight A's. But the reality is there's so much growth in challenging yourself. And this is a space where everyone wants you to succeed. The professors are pushing you, the hard classes are pushing you because they want you to grow. And it can be nerve-wracking, right? You started this program, they like threaten you around, the GPA, and what if I fall below a 3.0? The teachers here want you to succeed and they want you to learn. So really, this is a place to take risks and take those hard classes to challenge yourself. And, similar to you, I was kind of scared of adopting technology. So I'm really glad I took this class, and it really pushed me out of my comfort zone. And now I'm working on a project that is using generative AI. So please do step out of your comfort zone while you're here at Anderson.
Perfect. Excellent. And Bilal, your thoughts?
Yeah. Number one, I would say is create a vision. Every job is, you can do the right thing, but what's going to really make you really be the star is having a vision. And that kind of reminds me of my time at Nike. I learned a lot about Phil Knight. He had that vision of going to Japan and using their manufacturing methods and selling cheap shoes and make a high profit into the U.S. market and abroad, and really bringing that vision out and staying with it. And it kind of comes down to just being with the right people in the right time, which you've already done. You're in business school. You're with smart people. You're at this immersion, and just see for yourself. Travel, go to the immersion, increase your network by meeting alumni in Singapore and China. It's going to open so many doors. You'll find someone who can really get you that A to Z speed to make that product that you're thinking about, and really lose that hesitancy of, I'm going to invest some money in this product that I believe it's going to be the next big disruptor. It's really going to be able to really just change the game in terms of starting your own business or elevating in your career. So have that vision in mind, and remember, use tech for good.
Excellent. Good message. I like the tagline at the end there. So we're going to do audience questions. We've got a lot of questions, which is terrific. Matter of fact, the first question has got 26 upvotes. I think it's a record for any of the conferences we've done. So the question is, and I'll let any of you answer this, or all of you. Competition between the U.S. and China leads to one being hesitant to adopt each other's technology. How do we see the global competition affecting the development of AI? Who wants to start?
I could take this one, if you don't mind. Yeah, it kind of goes back to when I said, use it or lose it. AI is going to be a big disruptor in emerging markets. And what's been the biggest laggard is, we're still hesitant to put our information into our phone, our bank account information, et cetera. You really what really makes you a disruptor is being able to use that technology and at speed. When it comes to America versus China, I would say with the current administration, they've done some really good things, and they've done some, stuff that could have some work. So you really have to keep in mind who are the leaders that can be who are going to be in place, and the laws that they're going to be using for, whether it's pro AI or not pro AI. How does that look in the long run for, universal income? Is that going to put more employers out of jobs, or is that going to bring more innovation for Americans, and then less outside of the U.S.? So I'll just keep that in mind. Really, you just have to put context in the matter. For example, the current administration made a really big improvement for Amazon against Temu and SHEIN, which is a good short-term bandage. But the next question is, what happens when those tariffs are gone in the next administration? So it's derailed the impact of, disruptors coming up. But, like I said, use it or lose it.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Super helpful. Juliana?
So I think we have very different structures, right? I think Professor Kramer has mentioned here we're capitalist and more individualistic, whereas in China there's more of a collective of what's in it for the greater good. So one thing that we saw when we were there is that we have that. They're thinking about the majority of the population, but they also have a lot of competition within cities. So the Chinese government, like our government, is investing a ton of money in AI, right? And then they have their cities compete against each other of who's going to get those government funds. So as Sarah mentioned, there's a lot of eagerness, there's a lot of hunger that we saw in China of being there first. And we're seeing it here as well with, Google and Amazon and Microsoft. So I think, we're competing against each other, and we're investing a ton of money. It's like, who's going to come up top, and if the governments are going to support each of their own companies, if they will. We're still kind of in the midst of it, of what's going to happen. But I think both of them, right, have their pros and cons. With the Chinese, you have a more long-term vision because they have a more long-term government, whereas here it changes. So what dynamics will that change with the new administration coming and how they're going to support AI? So, yeah.
Good. Excellent. And let me add one point from my own experience being at Vodafone, which is a global business with country operations all over. Some of the best traits of leaders is when you're in one market to say, where is there a best practice that I would import and where is there best practice I would export? As opposed to saying everything I do is the best in class and I'm exporting all these ideas. It's a cultural item because it depends on the leaders valuing people's ability to say, hey, I really like this idea of a super app, with Tencent. I really like the idea of mobile apps. Why don't we have that idea here? That ability to kind of take in is a very important skill, but it's a cultural one. Sometimes we have pride of authorship that gets in the way of adoption, which is not good. Next question, how does the growing divide between the US and Chinese AI models affect global efforts to regulate AI, given their different approaches to ethics, design, and data? Who wants to take that one? Bilal, you were smiling. You want to take that one?
Yeah, it's hard not to get into politics. That's why I'm smiling. I didn't want to use this word, but when we were in China, there was a lot of hesitancy in terms of, Americans elected Trump. So I feel like there has to be some dialogue from American companies to Chinese companies saying, what each other's, governance looks like, whether you practice this, or whether you practice this type of democracy or not. And I think you really have to be able to create that stance of understanding how to talk to someone in terms of like a different, in terms of a different language, culture, if you're looking to adopt different customers in different areas. The biggest problem is going to be like developing markets. For example, I think a good example is Southeast Asia and India. India might go more towards an American AI model or something mixed with AI, with their own tech and ours. While a country like Indonesia or Singapore, you'll see a much more Chinese forward, Chinese first technology and American last. For example, you won't see Uber be used as much as Grab in Singapore. I'm not even sure if Singapore is used if Uber is used in Singapore anymore. But things like that. So I was afraid of using the word Cold War, but technology is really going to be almost kind of like the place where we're going to see who's going to be the best to win it. And for example, 5G and that war right there.
Yep. Good. Any additions?
I was just thinking, since you are at Amazon, right, we can go back even to kind of the Siri versus Alexa situation, right, where Apple restricted the learning of Siri, but Amazon really opened up Alexa and allowed her to kind of listen in and learn, and how that really impacted the development. And I still, every time I try to use Siri, get really, really frustrated. Right? Because she is not nearly as good as some of the other AI agents that you can work with. And so I think that that's a big difference. But it gets back to this individualistic versus collectivism. I think what we'll see probably in the US is that we'll get some really good large language models that are very, very good at very specific things where they have been kind of gated to perform very well because of our kind of the way we compartmentalize things as individualists. Whereas I think China, you'll see probably that because they allow the models to be a lot more open, they'll just be different in nature. And I think it's pros and cons of different types of models, right? I think there are certain things that Siri does fantastic, right? And that's what she was created for. But like, I think that's one of the things that we'll see. And I think it's beyond governments. I think it's also a cultural difference.
Yep. Yeah. One of the important points that everybody's bringing up here, the regulatory environments are quite different, especially China versus US versus Europe. And knowing what those environments are matters. So Europe in general has had a much more restrictive regulatory environment regarding AI and technology than any of the other places. The US has had kind of a balanced view, I would call it, meaning you better not harm the customer, but as long as you can prove you're helping the customer, lower costs, better selection, et cetera, you can advance, independent of scale and other things. China started very, very open, and then it took a hard turn 2-3 years ago. Jack Ma made some disparaging remarks about the Chinese government. He's founder of Alibaba, and all of a sudden sentiment started to turn. And by the way, I think it's an important learning for all of us as business leaders to make sure we're always remembering we operate in a much bigger environment than just our business. It isn't just our own customers and stakeholders and shareholders, but it is society. And you get ahead of yourself, you can end up being punished for that, and that ends up being not so good. The second point I would just raise, and I think Sarah was referencing this, DeepSeek is a fascinating use case here. So DeepSeek, people said China's way behind the US regarding large language models. We have, ChatGPT and a bunch of great models here, Gemini that Google has, etc. DeepSeek came from seemingly nowhere and had performance that was almost comparable to the US large language models at a fraction of the cost and much quicker, a disruptive play. So to Bilal's earlier point, you can say you have protection, kind of geographic protection, but to assume that's going to last in perpetuity is not a good idea. You've got to answer the question, are you being competitive in everything that you do? Putting the barriers around, generally people get impatient with that at some point. So thinking about where you're going to win the game, a lot of the game now is being played more at the application layer on large language models. So as an example, call centers with the data that a large company, Comcast, Verizon has, can you power a customer service agent that creates much better capabilities? But all of this says, think about where all the best practices are. Don't make your career on erecting borders and boundaries, but think instead about how does this stuff look different and better? And I think, again, with our global immersions, this is a lot of where the learnings come from. Let's see here. How can we apply well-developed solutions from Asian countries like digital payments and Q-commerce to the American consumer who are fundamentally different? Good. Who wants to take that one? This is a smart group we've got. These are great questions.
Yes. They are great questions.
Good. Bilal, you want to start? You're smiling. Any of you that are in my class
and
you don't
maybe
want to answer.
define Q-commerce.
Any of you that are in my class that don't want to answer a question, there's no way to get out of it. If you look down, I'll call on you. If you look at me, I said you made eye contact, you must want to say something. You're going to end up speaking. So fortunately, there's no single right answer. You can just share your thoughts. Bilal, you want to start?
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of your point of context matters, and you really have to know who the customer is. The Asian market is very different in different parts, whether it's India, China, Indonesia. It's going to look very different. For example, we met with Grab, and they were talking about how do they put promotions for Ramadan in Indonesia, and that was a whole festive day. He met with the president. What can they do to increase riders who are also on vacation, while they're trying to celebrate their holiday, but get people to where they need to be from A to Z. So you really got to think about the diversity of the group of your customer, and when it comes to American customers, like you said, they're going to be very different when it comes to data privacy, whether it's Europe, America. So will Americans be more trustful of sharing their data with companies? If you look at Sam Altman's last interview, I believe, he was talking about people telling about their deepest, darkest secrets on ChatGPT. They might give it to a startup. However, when it's a company like Amazon or Meta, they might be a bit hesitant. So I think who's going to get that data is really going to transform how the customer is going to look like in 2 to 5 years.
Yep, data's the next oil. Do you guys want to add anything?
I guess kind of an aside, I don't know how many of you are new to Los Angeles, but how many people have taken a Waymo?
Oh.
Wow.
Nice.
Right? Wow. Yeah, right. So I think context also matters in America, right? And so, it's pretty impressive. And if you haven't taken a Waymo, please do while you're here. It's really amazing. It's definitely a way of the future. But, I think, when you talk about adoption, I go out to eat in Westwood and I don't even bring a wallet anymore, right? I pay, like every server has, either a phone or a Square or some kind of device that I just use my Apple Pay, at any restaurant down in Westwood. But recently I moved up to Ventura. And there I have to keep remembering to bring my wallet, right? And Ventura is only like an hour from here. But, technology adoption in America is difficult because, there's so much diversity of culture. And so there's not, again, this individualism, right? Yeah. And these individual communities based on their demographics, based on how far away they are from a technology. I think there's, you'll see it just expand slower in the US, but I think we are starting to adopt it, especially in some of the major cities like Los Angeles.
Yeah. And by the way, this is an excellent point because we tend to look at a market as monolithic and it actually varies a lot. It varies on age. It varies on where people live. It varies on urban versus rural. There's a variety of criteria there. I mean, you looked at whatever, 80% have done a Waymo. If you looked at that for the whole country, it'd probably be 5%. So always look at that because that context matters within the US as well. What did the companies you work with do differently or better than US companies? Why do you think they did this? What were the companies, standout companies during our travels to Shenzhen and to Singapore that they did better than us?
I was like, I don't want to take your guys' thunder. I'll just quickly go.
Yeah.
I think Tencent is one of the really interesting ones because they do so many different things. And I think sometimes in the US, most of our companies are very deep in one area. And we kind of start to get in these group thinks of, this is the way that this industry has always done this thing. And, we forget to look at like maybe how an adjacent industry or even a very different industry is doing something. And I think because they do so many different things, it allows them to be innovative across each of their different areas. So from rideshare to, payment apps to their WeChat, I think, they can learn from each other and that really helps each of their divisions be more innovative. And I think that would be really beneficial if we could do more of that. And I think business school is a great time to try to really embrace that and learn from your colleagues in other industries.
Yeah. Excellent. By the way, I want to just tag on what Sarah was saying earlier about Tencent and Shenzhen. To me, are actually very relevant. The city itself, when you talk about different contexts and everything else, the city is only 40 years old. It was a fishing village before that. It looks like Manhattan. It looks like New York in terms of vertical, but it's 100 years newer than Manhattan. It is a fascinating example. So when people talk about it, I think, Bilal, you mentioned this, and Juliana, the rate of change is quite fast. People often have dated views. When students wanted to pay for coffee in Shenzhen, it was comical to see what happened. They first would pull out a credit card. No credit cards. Cash. No cash. Everything was going to be Alipay, WeChat's pay service, etc. It was going to be a mobile payment service. So again, a leapfrog innovation, a real reminder of where things are going. Let me ask one or two quick questions, and I'm going to do a wrap here. So this one is anonymous. It's probably a safer approach, but what would an MBA AI agent look like? What would our value propositions be as candidates entering a rapidly changing world, industry, and workforce? Who wants to take that? It's a great question. Bilal, you're smiling again.
That's a tough one. But if I were to make a persona for MBA AI agent, it's someone who thinks for the customer first. You know, who's going to be my customer? Second, it's going to be able to pull data with, you know, the Rosenfield library input or something like that. Be able to use that whole amount of data and be able to make insights. Be able to create strategic insights that I would say bring innovation to the next level. Not just kind of say, you know, what's obvious. Not just saying like, all right, you know, revenue equals price times volume. How can we increase revenue? Was it price or volume? It's more so what innovation can we make with the customer to give them the most hyper-focused solution, and being able to be as customized as possible for each customer, because every customer will be different. And with AI, we can use data to make those solutions as specific as possible.
Excellent. Yeah.
Just to add on to what Bilal was saying, I think also monetizing. I think one of the things that we need to consider is how are we going to make money, right? Is with Google and Facebook, or Meta, it's more of the advertising model, their subscription model. So in addition to that is how do you think, right? How do you brainstorm the options that you have, right? If the advertiser pays, if we do subscription, if we do a combo, if we get it subsidized either by the supplier or the buyer. So just coming up with different business models of what that would look like and how you're going to sell it.
Good. So let me do this. At the end of all programs I do, I share my so whats. So what were my takeaways and implications of what they shared, hopefully to add to your own. And I'll let you guys either upgrade whatever I say if I've missed something or you want to add to it, or you can share your parting comments. So I've got 5 items here. Number 1, the rate of adoption in the greater Asia region in many, many areas is quite notable. Leapfrog innovation, the ability for customers to adopt. Think about the pace of adoption is quite quick and changing a lot. Number 2, network effects. Network effects basically saying the advantage of scale, the use of scale that has improved product performance, that has improved the functioning of a platform-based model, has created superior outcomes that creates a reinforcing nature and a very fascinating thing, related competitive positioning. Third comment is all about AI. As a matter of fact, this one's got 2 or 3 points with it, so I should get 2 or 3 points all. But AI is everywhere. Make sure you have a vision for AI, and the reference to it wasn't just at a company level, it was at an individual level. What is your own vision for AI? What do you want to learn, et cetera? How are you going to incorporate it, et cetera? Don't be afraid to try it out and to use it. You've got to kind of jump in the cold swimming pool on this. Think about use cases related to AI. All of that is saying this thing is moving quite quickly. A related item to that is one of the last questions that was asked about the MBA AI agent. By the way, consulting firms are going through this. McKinsey's talking about how basic analyst roles are going to get automated more and more. What all 3 of them said is you better be good at the higher order thinking. Yeah, the water level is rising and there's plenty of issues to focus on that are complex, but don't get stuck down in the basic task activity, because that will get commoditized. So how do you think about where and when innovation is going to happen? How do you think about the timing of it? How do you think about digital transformations? How do you think about customers adopting? These are very complex issues that can't be easily answered, but you've got to be good at this. Because again, in the absence of that, you've got competition. And then the final comment was context matters. And we talked about it in the US environment, but we talked about it more broadly. Be a student of context matters. First, understand context before you define strategy and your views on things. So let me now give a chance to anything that I've missed on this or you want to upgrade. Juliana?
I think the only thing is congratulate yourselves for being here. You are the future leaders of our businesses. So know that, right? And know that it's important, the decisions that you make. Data will be there, how to collect data. But I think the most important thing as a leader is how to make decisions. And there's always going to be give and takes. It's always going to be, what are the benefits and what are the challenges of the decisions that you make for your company, for your team, for the society, for the customers you serve. So when you're going through your classes of, sometimes it's a grind and you're doing accounting and finance and this, it's like, always remember why you're here, right? You are going to be leaders. How can you use this information to make the best decisions moving forward? And it's okay. I mean, as Sarah mentioned, you will make mistakes. We're all human and we might, but the more that we're confident about decisions that we make and why we make them and how we make them, just think as you're going through the grind in some classes, remember the high level of why you're here and making sure you polish of how you make decisions and how to make the best decisions for all of us.
Well said. Well said. Sarah?
Don't take our word for it, right? You have 2 years, some of you have 3 years ahead of you at Anderson. Take the class, go to Asia, take tech management, get in there, and tell us what you learned, right? We want to be lifelong learners, and we look forward to coming back to this event and hearing your perspective of what you learned.
Absolutely.
Excellent points. Excellent points. Bilal?
Yeah, it just goes back to having that vision. A lot of people think it might be fluff, but it really stands out for what someone's internal goal is going to be, for what their career trajectory is going to be, and also what they can do for society. Just stick to that vision. As you meet alumni and you see who's successful, you'll notice that they had that one vision. They had that one thing they want to do to help either society or themselves. And, it really shows and sticks out.
Excellent. So listen, let me share a few thank yous here. This event exceeded my expectations, just in terms of the dialogue and the content and a variety of things. First of all, I want to thank Michael Wu and his family, who have been almost lifelong supporters of everything we've done. So thank you very much. I want to thank Lucy and her team. They are such a pleasure to work with. They set a high bar. They think of student and student experience, and always a pleasure to do business with you. So a big thank you. I'd like to thank also the Greater China Business Association and the UCLA Chinese Student and Scholar Association that help us promote this event and think about what we need to be achieving. So thank you to them as well. I want to thank Sarah and Juliana and Bilal. I said to them when we start out, I said, I'm a tech guy, so you won't hear comments like content is king or queen in tech. You hear that in media and entertainment. But I said, when we put on events, content is the supreme, meaning the three of them who've shared their insights and made for a really good set of learnings. A big thank you to the three of you. And finally, let me just thank all of you. I think it's such a fascinating barometer to the caliber of students and the points you guys made, by the way, about rising leaders. You're asking good questions. You're immersing yourself. To Bilal's point, have a personal vision and advance on it. Great job to all of you. I hope all of you have a great journey here and beyond. And a big thank you. Have a great evening.